Ethan stood outside the tall glass building, staring up at its shining windows as if they were silently mocking him. He had woken up at dawn, pressing his only clean shirt under the weight of an old textbook because he couldn't afford an iron, polishing his shoes with a rag that had more holes than fabric, and rehearsing his introduction in front of the cracked bathroom mirror. His daughter Lily had been perched on the sink, her little legs dangling, watching him with sleepy eyes. She had whispered, "Daddy, you'll get this job, I know it," before hugging his waist tightly, leaving behind the faint smell of strawberries from her shampoo. That memory was what pushed him forward now, into a world where he constantly felt like he didn't belong. Inside, the lobby gleamed. The polished floors reflected his nervous steps, and the receptionist's well-manicured nails tapped against a keyboard as she looked up at him with the kind of smile reserved for strangers who clearly don't fit in. He gave his name, his voice cracking slightly, and was handed a visitor's badge that seemed too official, too heavy for his chest. The elevator ride to the 12th floor felt endless, and as the doors opened, Ethan was met with a rush of cool air and the faint scent of expensive perfume. Employees walked by briskly, dressed in sharp suits, their laughter echoing confidence. He pulled at his tie, suddenly aware of the frayed edge he had tried to hide beneath his collar. The interviewer, Ms. Reynolds, welcomed him into a conference room that was both intimidating and impersonal, walls lined with certificates, a long table polished to a shine, and a view of the city that stretched endlessly beyond the glass. She shook his hand firmly, her eyes scanning him with quick efficiency, and then gestured for him to sit. Ethan's palms were damp, and he wiped them against his trousers before nervously flipping open his folder. The papers inside looked pathetic compared to the gleaming surface they rested on. An outdated resume, a few references from places that had long since closed down, and certificates from community workshops that hardly seemed to matter in this world of gleaming degrees and high expectations. She began with easy questions, or at least they should have been. "Tell me about yourself." Ethan swallowed hard. He wanted to say he was a man who hadn't given up despite life throwing every obstacle in his path. He wanted to say he was a father who learned how to braid hair, fix school lunches, and read bedtime stories while working graveyard shifts to keep the lights on. But instead, his words stumbled. I used to work in logistics. Shipping and receiving. I was there for almost 6 years until they downsized. Since then, I've been doing, different things, trying to keep busy." His answer hung awkwardly in the air, and Ms. Reynolds nodded politely, jotting something down on her notepad, her pen moving with a speed that unnerved him. She asked about his skills with computers, and his heart sank. He knew the basics, enough to manage emails and fill out forms, but the more she pressed about software and databases, the more his mind blanked. He remembered the nights spent trying to teach himself online tutorials while Lily slept, the frustration when the laptop froze, the guilt when he wanted to throw it out the window but didn't, because she needed it for her homework. His voice faltered as he admitted, "I'm still learning." Her pen scratched again, and Ethan felt his chest tighten. The interview continued, each question feeling heavier than the last. "Tell me about a time you handled conflict at work." His mind raced. Did he tell her about the time his old manager unfairly blamed him for a delayed shipment? How he bit his tongue because arguing would have cost him his job, the only paycheck keeping a roof over Lily's head. He tried to explain, but the story came out jumbled, lacking the polish and confidence that the situation demanded. He could see it in her eyes, he wasn't convincing. As the minutes dragged on, his confidence dwindled. Every stumble over his words reminded him of the countless other interviews where he had walked out with the same sinking feeling. He thought of Lily again, her little face lighting up when he promised he would come back with good news. He had wanted to bring her a small toy as a celebration, but now even that thought felt cruel, because he just knew, this wasn't going well. Finally, Ms. Reynolds gave him that polite but final smile, the one he had seen too many times before. "Thank you for coming in, Mr. Carter. We'll be in touch." The words were professional, but the tone carried the weight of rejection. Ethan forced a nod, standing slowly, gripping his folder tightly as if it were the only thing holding him together. His legs felt heavy, and his throat burned with shame. He wanted to say something, anything, that would change her mind, but the words stuck inside him, frozen by the fear of sounding desperate. As he walked out of the room, the hallway seemed longer than before. Each step echoed with failure, bouncing against the sterile walls. By the time he reached the elevator, his shoulders had slumped, and his vision blurred. He pressed the button and waited, his reflection staring back at him in the silver doors, a man who looked far older than 35, with tired eyes and a heart that carried too much weight. He thought of Lily again, sitting at the kitchen table, coloring with her crayons. How could he look into her hopeful eyes tonight and tell her once again, maybe next time? The elevator dinged, and Ethan stepped inside, his chest tightening as the doors slid shut. He clutched the visitor's badge in his hand, fingers trembling, before ripping it off and shoving it into his pocket. He couldn't shake the suffocating thought that maybe he wasn't good enough, not just for the job but for the future Lily deserved. And as the elevator carried him down toward the lobby, away from the shining offices above, Ethan's heart sank lower than it had in years. The lobby felt colder now, the glass walls letting in too much light, too much reality. Ethan walked toward the exit, his steps unsteady, the rejection already echoing in his mind. He pushed open the heavy glass door, the city's noise rushing at him all at once, car horns, voices, the distant wail of a siren. He wanted to disappear into the crowd, to become invisible so that no one could see the man who had just failed again. But before he could take another step, a voice called sharply behind him. "Mr. Carter, wait." Ethan froze, his heart skipping. He turned slowly, expecting maybe he had forgotten to sign a form, maybe the receptionist needed his badge. But it wasn't her, it was Ms. Reynolds, the interviewer, standing in the doorway. She wasn't holding her polished notepad anymore. Her professional smile had vanished, replaced by something softer, something uncertain. For a moment, Ethan didn't move. His mind was too tangled with confusion and the lingering sting of rejection. She stepped closer, her heels clicking against the marble floor, her expression more human than he had ever expected. "I can't stop thinking about what you said earlier," she began. Her voice was different now, less formal, almost hesitant. "About raising your daughter alone. About doing whatever you can just to get by." Ethan blinked, trying to process her words. His chest tightened, torn between hope and suspicion. Too many times, he had been given false promises, too many times told someone would be in touch, only to never hear back. He kept his voice low, almost defensive. I didn't think that mattered." She shook her head quickly. "It matters more than you know. You see, this company, we talk about resilience, about loyalty, about dedication. But sitting across from you, I realized, you live those qualities every single day. You didn't have all the right answers, and that's fine. Skills can be taught, but determination, heart, that's something you can't fake." Ethan felt his throat tighten, his hand tightening on the strap of his folder. No one had spoken to him like that in years, not since before his life had unraveled. He opened his mouth, but only a broken whisper came out. "Are you serious?" Her lips curved into a faint smile, the kind of smile that wasn't rehearsed but real. She nodded. "Yes, I want to give you another chance. Come back inside. Let's talk properly this time." For a long moment, Ethan just stood there, the noise of the city fading into the background. He thought of Lily, waiting at home, her crayons scattered across the table, her faith in him unshaken no matter how many times he stumbled. He thought of all the nights he had lain awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he was failing her, if she would grow up resenting him for all the things he couldn't provide. And now, here was this unexpected moment, this fragile thread of hope being extended to him. His chest rose and fell heavily, and finally, he nodded. His voice was rough with emotion when he said, "Okay." She turned, motioning for him to follow, and he did. His footsteps felt lighter, though disbelief still clung to him. Back inside the building, the lobby didn't seem so cold anymore. The receptionist glanced at them curiously, but Ms. Reynolds ignored it, leading him straight back to the elevator. This time, Ethan didn't avoid his reflection in the polished doors. He saw the same tired man, yes, but now there was something else in his eyes, something that looked like possibility. When the doors opened to the 12th floor again, he felt a strange shift inside him. The conference room was the same, the view of the city unchanged, but the atmosphere was different. She didn't sit across from him this time with her pen poised like a weapon. Instead, she leaned forward, clasping her hands on the table. Mr. Carter, she said gently, tell me about what drives you. Not your resume, not your certificates, you. Ethan took a shaky breath. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to be honest without worrying about sounding polished or impressive. He told her about Lily, about holding her tiny hand in the hospital when she was born, about how her mother had left soon after, leaving him with both the fear and the miracle of raising a child alone. He told her about working double shifts, about eating the cheapest meals so she could have better ones, about teaching himself things late at night because he wanted to keep up with a world that was always moving too fast. His voice cracked more than once, and his hands trembled, but he didn't stop. She listened, really listened, and when he finished, she smiled in a way that made Ethan's chest ache. That's what I wanted to hear. That's who you are, and that's exactly who we need here. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan let out a laugh, quiet, disbelieving, but filled with relief. His shoulders sagged as if a weight had been lifted, and his eyes burned with unshed tears. He whispered, "Thank you." And as he sat there, across from a woman who had chosen to see him not just as a resume but as a man fighting for his daughter's future, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not just hope, but the beginning of belonging.